show, Grizzly, bitch.
What up and Happy New Year, me Militia. I'm Mean Joe Grizzly, and when I'm not witnessing the end of an era and the finale of one of the greatest sci-fi horror shows of all time, I'm at the Grizzly Cave, watching a review of movies while, of course, crushing beers. And I am about to bring y'all my spoiler-filled review and thoughts on Stranger Things Season 5 Volume 2 and the finale. Did the Duffer Brothers stick the landing and deliver a very satisfying conclusion to this sci-fi horror epic, or did they drop the ball and deliver Game of Thrones 2.0? Let's find out. This is Grizzly Grade Reviews. So before we talk about the finale, I want to give some thoughts on Volume 2 just to set the stage for how I felt about the finale. Starting out, I want to say there's some pretty great moments in Volume 2, one of which is a couple of plot threads that were established at the beginning of the season that they kind of wrapped up in this volume. Starting out, you have Jonathan and Nancy who have this pretty good moment where they finally reconcile their differences and kind of figure out how they are going to move forward in their relationship. And it's essentially them breaking up. And at first, it didn't really feel that way. It felt like that they were just not getting married and they were going to try to figure each other out then. But they ultimately decided that the only reason why they were in love with each other or had feelings for each other was because of shared experiences and the trauma that they have experienced. And so they essentially did a unproposal. He takes out the wedding ring and he asks her, "Can I unpropose to you?" They agreed, and then they essentially fix all of their problems by breaking up. And it sounds very, very negative, but it kind of works. It is something that has been kind of obvious since season 4, where Jonathan was in LA and Nancy was back in Hawkins, and Nancy was doing her thing and Jonathan was doing his thing, and both of them had these plans, but neither one of them exacted those plans to try to meet in the middle and achieve the goals that they had set for each other as a couple. So ultimately, it's been this thing that's been lingering around, and it comes off at first as Nancy's got feelings for Steve again because Steve was there for her in Hawkins when everything was going down. But essentially what it is Jonathan had all these feelings and was trying to fix it with stuff that wasn't going to fix it. He thought that asking her to marry him was going to fix all their problems, and then he finally realized that they're just not meant to be together, and they've been fighting that for a very long time. So I thought the setting where they were in the room that was melting around them and essentially they were going to drown, and having that moment to looking on the outside in, it kind of looks like that moment was just a little bit too convenient, but at the same time, it's been building to this. They've been building to a moment like this where their relationship was going to come to a head and it was going to be make or break time. And I think that the Duffer Brothers handled this very well. But probably the most emotionally impactful and the best moment of Volume 2 to me was the final conflict between Dustin and Steve, where they have both been heading on this collision course with each other because Dustin is resentful and vengeful for his friend Eddie and doesn't think anybody understands how he feels, and he's just this really dark character this season. And then you have Steve, who is essentially just pouting about it and not being a good friend. He's kind of sitting back saying that he cares about him, but he's not doing anything to console him, to help him, or anything like that. He's just pretty much telling him to suck it up. Your friend was an idiot, got himself killed, and now you're acting like an idiot, which there is some truth in that, but at the same time, it's something that you don't say to your best friend. And ultimately, it leads both of them to get into a physical altercation. And it was something that was very real and visceral for me because back in the day, that's how you and your boys settled things. Eventually, y'all two are going to have to fight. And it's going to either break your friendship or it's going to make your friendship and bring you closer. And I thought that was a very good way of handling that. To even springboard off of that, to kind of wrap up this whole conflict with them, the moment that Nancy shoots the exotic matter, which is this big ball of energy that's very unstable, hovering above Hawkins' lab, it causes this massive propulsive energy that causes chaos throughout the Upside Down, where literally a hole gets ripped into the wall and it's essentially a vacuum and it's sucking everything into it. And you think this is kind of the end times. Everything's going down now. It eventually wasn't. But in that moment, Steve is doing everything he can to get upstairs to find out what happened to Nancy and Jonathan. And he's being really reckless. So he lays a ladder down on the steps. And Dustin could clearly see that this ladder is not going to hold him and he's going to fall to his death. So him and Steve begin arguing once again. And eventually Dustin just pulls Steve to him and says, "Look, dude, I can't lose you too. Don't make me feel that way again. I don't want to ever feel that way again." And they have this moment, and ultimately that ladder does fall. So essentially Dustin did save Steve from doing something stupid and getting himself killed. And I just thought that moment was the most emotional, impactful moment for those two characters that we have been waiting for. We've been waiting for them to kind of get back to normal and get their regular camaraderie again, because I don't know about y'all, but it didn't feel the same with those two at each other's throats the whole time. It gives a different dynamic and raises a little bit of intrigue, but ultimately I like it when those two characters are getting along and they want to be best buds. I think that the moment that Vecna sent the demo dogs after Max's body in the hospital, and Lucas and Robin and her girlfriend had to get her body out of there and try to save her from these demo dogs, I thought that moment was really cool and really intense, and you didn't really know what was going to happen. And then out of nowhere, Mrs. Wheeler comes out and kicks their ass again by throwing an oxygen tank into the wash machine or the dryer and blowing it up and killing all the demo dogs. And she just has these two incredible badass moments now that really made me like that character even more. Like, you don't mess with Miss Wheeler. She will do what she's got to do to protect these kids. And I think it's cool to see somebody else other than Joyce and Hopper actually putting themselves in harm's way to save these kids from these horrible monsters. I thought that moment was kick-ass. I thought it was really smart in what they did to get Will to reconnect to the hive mind, where they took the bodies of all the Demogorgons that he killed in the episode Sorcerer, where they kind of rigged them up to get all of this electricity from the radio tower at the Squawk and kind of Frankenstein them back to life so that he could reach into the hive mind and disrupt Vecna or find out what Vecna's doing, ultimately saving Max's life, where he took over Vecna's body, destroyed his leg, and then told Max to run. And that what ultimately leads to Max and Holly jumping through more memories and finally finding their way out. And I thought that scene was just really cool, especially from a visual standpoint. I thought it was just awesome. Anything that's going to take reference back from the classic Universal monsters and have like really cool effects on top of it, I'm always going to be here for. I thought that the revelation of what Brenner was doing at Hawkins wasn't the MK Ultra project necessarily. It was them transfusing these pregnant women with Henry's blood, and that ultimately was affecting these kids with powers from the Upside Down and trying to produce these super soldiers. And we learned this by way of number 8, Callie, and that is ultimately what the military's plot is, what their mission is to reestablish that program to where they can have super soldiers to fight in the Cold War. And unfortunately, I don't think it was fleshed out enough, but I did think it was a very clever way to bring Callie back and give her a purpose in her mission, because we already had established that she is scorched earth. She wants to kill everybody involved in the program, and so that this could never happen to anybody again. So it kind of gives us this little dynamic where she is now presenting Elle with an option to pretty much kill herself after they defeat Vecna, so that they could break the cycle. And I don't think that's a bad idea, but at the same time, it kind of felt like the easy idea. I liked how we came to that conclusion and how they presented that as what the real answer was. I just don't think that the military and their role in the show is prevalent enough to warrant them actually being there and having such a big role in the show for this season. And finally, I like the reveal of what the Upside Down actually is, and I think it was a pretty cool idea to have the Upside Down be a bridge, a wormhole to the Dimension X, or what they call the Abyss. I thought that was really, really cool of an idea and a good concept. I also like Vecna's overall arcing plans of what he's going to do, where he is going to use the kids to strengthen his powers in order to move the Abyss or Dimension X towards our planet and merge the two so he could change the world the way that he wants it to be. To me, it wasn't oversimplified, and it was something that was logical within that universe. And I know that some people might be opposed to that idea, but I thought it was pretty well done, and it was a decent way to kind of bring in what Vecna's ultimate plan is. But I did have some issues that ultimately did affect my hype for the finale. Starting off, even more than Volume 1, there is just way too much exposition in this show this season. I don't remember it ever being this frequent and this much in the other seasons, but there is literally in every episode multiple scenes where someone is explaining the plan or explaining what's going on instead of showing us what's going on. That's one of the things that is always going to irk my nerves when movies or TV shows can't give you proper storytelling and have to explain to the audience what's going on like we're all stupid. And I get that sometimes you can't avoid doing some of that, but when that method of screenwriting and scene writing is something that is consistently recycled throughout the one whole episode and throughout the whole season, it gets super noticeable and it gets pretty damn annoying. And when I say there's too much exposition, they have to explain everything, not just one or two things that should be something that normal people can't understand, but they explain everything. Or they have to do all these pep talks. They always have to have some kind of powwow all the time, and it's just recycled, rinse, repeat over and over again. And quite frankly, it killed the tension. It made the stakes even lower, but they're telling you that the stakes is higher, but you don't feel it because they keep doing this shit that just keeps breaking up the tension. And it's not just with the exposition pieces that are scattered throughout this. It's just the structure of these episodes in general, or the way they have been edited. It never gives you the momentum or builds any tension towards saying, holy shit, this really is the end game, because of how these episodes are structured. It's like all over the place. There'd be a scene where something really critical is going on, and they would literally stop and have 10-minute conversation about what's going on. That happened during the Max and Holly escape from Camazot's episode, where Max has been trapped here in Henry's mindscape for 2 years, and she's seen the exit the first time years ago and didn't take the opportunity to go through it. Now she has it in front of her again. She stops and talks to Holly for 10 minutes. I know that's something that a lot of other people have said too, but it really is true. It is absolutely dumb, and it would never fucking happen. It would never happen in any situation. And this is a sensitive subject because people are either going to hate you for this or they're going to agree with you on this. There's no in between. But I didn't like Will's coming out scene. Shocker, I know. Nobody liked it, but not for the reasons that you think I didn't like it. I didn't like that scene because it wasn't placed in the right scene. It wasn't placed at the right time in the show. I feel like that this scene should have taken place either in season 4 at some point, or it should have took place around the Sorcerer episode where he discovers that he can hack into the hive mind. I thought that would have made that whole scene way more impactful. And the scene itself is structured very weird and awkwardly. It goes on forever, and it takes him forever to get to the point on what he's doing. And the actor that plays Will, he's already super, 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 super awkward when he's acting normal. Whenever Will has to do some kind of extreme emotional scene, or if he has to, like the moments where he taps into the hive mind and stuff, he's really, really good. This actor's very good, but when he's just talking to people normally, he is awkward as hell. And I don't understand it. Like, it's so strange that he acts like that everyone standing around him is in the nude and he just can't act right. He has to be all awkward the whole time. I don't know if that's just that actor's style or what, but it doesn't work. And the choice to put that scene right there when literally the entire world is crashing down around them at any moment, they decided to do it then. And it just doesn't work. It isn't a logical placement for that scene. So the scene itself isn't something that I was upset about like most people were for the wrong reasons. It was the placement and the build up to that scene, because there's even a part where Will's mind gets trapped in Henry's mind, and Vecna is torturing him and trying to get information out of him so that he can find out where Max's body is so he can attack Max's body in the real world. And when he finally gets freed by 11, he pulls his mom to the side and says, he showed me horrible things. Like he showed him all of his friends' deaths or the death of the whole world or something like that. And instead it was, nobody accepted me and I was alone. And that was what elicited this it's this emotional response to, like, he just watched all of his friends and family get massacred, but all along it was something that he wasn't accepted. And I find that to be something that was just ridiculous. Now, don't get me wrong, I understand that in the 80s especially, coming out was something that was a big deal, because you alienated your entire family and friends around you if you did that most of the time. So I understand the significance of that, and someone who is not part of that community, I don't know how that feels, but I'm pretty sure it doesn't feel like you watched everybody get chopped into pieces and your world get destroyed in front of you like that. Could be wrong, but that's just my take on it. I had no problem with the scene. I have a problem with its placement. The dialogue continued to get worse in this volume as well. Like, it's crazy. I swear to God, if anybody that's watching this now, have you ever seen Cobra Kai? Because if you've seen Cobra Kai, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Cobra Kai was on YouTube for a long time, and maybe for like the first 2 or 3 seasons, and then Netflix bought it. And when Netflix bought it, the writing got progressively worse in the show, and it was mainly from a dialogue standpoint, where it had this Disney Channel like dialogue, but then at moments they would drop an F-bomb or something like that. It was very childish and juvenile in the way it was written. And I feel like that whoever wrote that show's writing this shit too, because that's exactly how it feels. It feels like a elementary school kid wrote this dialogue for these characters. I don't understand it. And one of the things is, I got a pretty filthy mouth. I cuss a lot, but the overuse of the word goddamn is incredible. Like, at one point they said it like 20 times in an episode. All the characters did. It made no damn sense at all. Made no sense whatsoever. It was like just there to be there. And it didn't offend me. It just got on my damn nerves because it was just shitty dialogue. So I don't know what's up with that, because normally this show has great dialogue, but Volume 1's dialogue wasn't great, but Volume 2's dialogue was even worse. I am severely disappointed in how they wasted Linda Hamilton in this show. Linda Hamilton is sci-fi horror royalty, and it didn't make any sense to bring her into this role if you was going to just not let her shine and not let her do her villain thing, or not even really give her a chance to shine in acting at all. I didn't understand it. Like, she has been relegated to like a background character when she should be relegated to being a background threat that is secondary to Vecna, and it doesn't feel that way. Only up until a certain point does it feel that way, and it mainly was in Volume 2 where she came face to face with 11 for the first time, and when she was kind of torturing Hopper with that creature from the Upside Down. I don't know what happened with this, and it is what it is, but it's a damn shame that they wasted such a good, talented actress on this. Now, the last gripe I have is one that I had in Volume 1 is, just like I stated before, there doesn't feel like there's any stakes involved. It's supposed to be the end game, but no one really feels like they're in any big time danger. And that's because I don't think any of those characters are going to die. I never once thought that any of these characters were going to die in Volume 2. And if you don't have some kind of danger like that, you have to kill off somebody. And I understand that in other seasons they've killed off secondary characters. I completely get that. You know, you had Billy, Eddie, you had freaking Bob, all these Alexi, you had all these characters. Hop had a fake out death, but it was very impactful. if you don't kill off a main character, then you got to find different ways to compensate for that, to raise the stakes. And I don't feel like they've done that yet. I feel like they have to kill off a main character. At least I did feel like they had to kill off a main character. And that's something that it's a hurdle they have to get over, because if you're not going to kill any of the main characters, you're going to have to damn sure find other ways to make it more tense. And in this volume, they did not do that. All of these issues that I had left me very underwhelmed and worried about the finale. I was extremely worried that this finale was going to fall flat and that it was going to be one of the biggest fumbles in the history of television, kind of like with The Sopranos, when at the end of The Sopranos, spoilers for the end of The Sopranos, you don't want to hear it, rewind it a little bit or fast forward a little bit, but Sopranos, the last 9 minutes of The Sopranos is black screen. Tony's about to get whacked. He don't know when he's going to get whacked. Him and his family are in a pizzeria, and he's constantly looking at all the exits, waiting on somebody to come in and pop him, and then the screen just goes black. And that was one of the biggest fumbles in the history of television. The Sopranos is still one of the best TV shows of all time, but the big problem is that we should have learned from that by now. Everybody should have learned from that. And I was so worried that that was going to be an issue with this finale. But after watching the finale, I can say without a shadow of a doubt that I think they did a damn good job of bringing us a satisfying finale. Not a perfect finale by no means, because it definitely has its issues, but a good one nevertheless. I really liked how they took this two-battlefield approach to fighting Vecna for the final battle. I liked how they went to the Hawkins lab in the Upside Down, and they put 11 in the sensory deprivation tank and had Callie on the outside of the tank, and both of them went into Henry's mindscape to attack him from there and to free all the children from their prison. I really liked how Henry found out the plan by reading 11's mind, and then he astral projected into the Upside Down where Hawkins' lab was and confronted Hopper, and him and Hopper kind of had this little standoff. I thought that was really good stuff, really good. The psychological games that he played with Hopper, and Hopper staying his ground, thinking that he shot Vecna, but really he shot the tank that 11 was in. That kind of was even another fake out only to break her concentration so she could get pulled out of his mindscape and he could finally concentrate on his plans. I thought that was a very well written scene, and I feel like overall this episode, the writing was a lot better. It's actually very strange because it's almost like this episode belongs in other seasons and the rest of them don't belong at all. So it's like they got back to basics and put everything they had into like the first set of episodes, and then everything they had into the finale, because the writing is way better here. And even though it didn't happen, and I'm glad it happened because Steve's my boy, I think they did a good job of building tension when Steve almost fell off the tower when the two worlds were merging. I thought that was a damn good fake out, and having Jonathan save him was a really good idea, and kind of gets them to a point where they can mend their fences and they can actually move on and be friends and stuff. Just don't know what happened with the writing in the other episodes, but it was significantly better in this, and this is one of the other scenes that shows that. I like that we finally got the rest of Henry's origin, even though it felt rushed and a little bit incomplete. I do like that we finally got to see what was in the briefcase and how he made contact with the Mind Flayer for the first time. And I also really like that they didn't take the cliche route where they gave him some type of redemption, where he joined forces with the kids and they fought the Mind Flayer all together. I'm so glad that they didn't do that. I'm glad that they kept him a villain until the very end. And I also like the revelation that him and the Mind Flayer are pretty much one and the same. They have completely merged together into one being. And although we have been told this entire time that the Mind Flayer is the big bad and Henry is just a vessel and a general for him, I think that it makes more sense that both of them are tied together. And speaking of the Mind Flayer, the return of the Mind Flayer is fucking awesome. I love what they did when they brought back the Mind Flayer. The whole time in the Abyss, Vecna has had all the kids strapped up all alien style inside this like castle looking fortress thing that looks like a bunch of fingers coming up out of the earth, like a dead spider on its back and its fingers are up in the earth. And that eventually transforms into the Mind Flayer, and he is ginormous. He is humongous. Like, one of his legs is as big as a small house. And I thought that was cool as shit, and I loved the design that they gave him. I thought that it was good to give it this familiar look, but also give it this really threatening and vicious and monstrous look. I thought they did such a good job with that. I did feel like that it was kind of ridiculous that nobody got hurt fighting this thing, because it literally is so big. If it stepped beside you, the shockwave of it would send you flying across the field, or the debris that it kicks up would actually kill you. It is that big of a creature. It's literally like Godzilla walking. And there's even a really cool Godzilla reference from Robin here that I thought was really cool. But I liked how they formulated a plan, and they worked as a team, and everybody played their part. Everybody was chipping away like you really are, like you're playing Final Fantasy and you're fighting a boss, and one player attacks the head, one player attacks the abdomen, one player attacks the arms and legs, and so on and so on till you wear this boss down. He was literally like a final boss, and I thought that they just did a good job with it. I just didn't feel like it was very likely that nobody got hurt, nobody got killed. Just by happenstance alone, someone should have died fighting this giant monster. I loved it when 11 showed up, joined the fight, throws a boulder at the Mind Flayer, smashing it in the face, and then enters its body to fight Vecna one-on-one. That fight was so fucking cool. And this fight had been building up for a very long time, and although they're not technically on an even playing field, the fight was intense nonetheless. I just wish that it was a little bit longer, just a little bit longer, and it would have been a little bit more satisfying. I loved how the entire group played their part to help defeat Vecna. The kids on the outside were attacking the body and damaging the body, which in turn was weakening Vecna. And then at the moment where 11 has Vecna where she wants him, and she's about to push him onto this big spike that's inside this thing, and looks like he's about to die, he does this last ditch effort where he shoots his little vine arm out, and is essentially going to kill 11, and then Will takes over and stops the arm, destroys it, and then 11 manages to push Vecna down, impaling him on a spike and essentially killing him. Or so we thought. So the day is saved, the Mind Flayer collapses, everybody goes in to start freeing these children from their little alien pods, and then Vecna is clinging to life on this spike. He's legitimately choking on his own blood. And Joyce Byers, this is probably one of the coolest scenes in the entire season. It's up there for me with the Stephen Dustin situation. I thought it was really cool that Joyce walks up to Vecna and tells Vecna, "You fucked with the wrong family," and then proceeds to decapitate him by swinging this axe down, chopping his head off. And as she is swinging the axe down, scenes keep flashing on the screen, this montage of all the people that have died, from Bob to Eddie to all these people that died fighting against Vecna's minions, and everything, that all the pain and suffering that Vecna caused. And eventually she hacks until his head just falls clean off, and Vecna is finally dead. I thought that was a pitch perfect chef's kiss scene, letting Joyce be the one to enact the killing blow. So the day is saved, and all of them are returning back to Hawkins via the portal, and they got Prince When Doves Cry playing in the background. Everything seems to be good. And then once they re-enter our world, they run over spikes, pop all their tires, they crash their trucks, and the military ransacks them and has them all held up. But 11 is nowhere to be found. And when everybody looks back, 11 is on the other side of the portal. And before they left, they set a bunch of bombs around the exotic matter, and it was about to detonate. That was going to essentially collapse the bridge and close the upside down forever. And 11 chooses to stay back and break the cycle and sacrifice herself, allegedly. And it was a very, very emotional scene between her and Mike, because she pulls Mike into her mind and talks to him and tells him, tell everybody to thank you for being so kind to me and for showing me that life is worth living. And it was a very, very emotional scene that I think Finn Wolfhard and Millie Bobby Brown did great. Particularly Millie Bobby Brown, I've had a lot of criticisms with her acting for this season because she feels like she was just kind of phoning it in. And she done a fantastic job in this last scene. I thought it was great. And it was this kind of exclamation point on the whole story that 11 had to sacrifice herself to keep the military from continuing to destroy people's lives and for creating super soldiers to fight in the Cold War. And another testament to how much better the writing was in this episode, there's this whole lingering plot line where Callie was telling 11 the only way we could stop all this for good is to break the cycle. And by both of them dying, when they kill Henry, they both stay behind, they collapse the bridge, and they stop this once and for all. And Hopper found out about these plans via his interaction with Vecna and was telling her that there is always a way, there's always a better way to do things. You don't have to sacrifice yourself and kill yourself to save us all. We will find a way. We'll deal with the military after we deal with Vecna. And ultimately, they make each other a promise that they won't do anything stupid. Then before she enters the abyss, she pulls Hopper aside, tells him that she loves him, and pretty much says, I'm not a kid anymore, and you have to respect whatever decision I make and trust that I'm going to make the right decision. So that coming full circle with her sacrificing herself was just, it was pitch perfect for me. I thought it was great. And then you come to one of my favorite parts of this episode, probably my second favorite part, minus the fight with Vecna at the end, is the epilogue of everything, where Robin's kind of narrating everything that's happened, because 18 months pass and we find all of our characters in different places and better places in their life besides Mike. Mike's the one that hasn't moved on yet. And they had this really good graduation ceremony where Dustin's a valedictorian. He gives a really cool speech that's very Eddie-esque and pretty much says Hellfire Club lives, with like this cool shirt he pulls off. He flips off the principal. Everybody throws their hat up and everything's cool. And then you get to a point where when everybody's celebrating, Mike just so happens to look at the speakers that are up, that's for the sound system, and he remembers that when everything was happening with 11, these machines that the military used to stop them from using their powers, they were running full blast. So how was 11 able to do the whole little mind trick thing if she was under all that pressure from those machines? And that's where he thinks that 11 might be out there somewhere and she might still be alive. And I'll talk more about that when we get to the very end of everything. So then you have Steve, who is now a baseball coach. You have Robin, who lives, I believe, in New York or something like that, or Massachusetts. And then you have Jonathan, who's an amateur filmmaker, and you have Nancy, who is working at the Herald in like some little town outside of New York. And they all converge, and they have this really emotional moment where they promise each other they're going to meet up once a month in Philadelphia, because that's a halfway point for everybody, and they can all get together and just stay friends and never lose touch. And this is the start of where everything is super, super emotional. And I believe that the emotions that are displayed by these actors and actresses in these final scenes are true emotions. Like they're legitimately saying goodbye to a part of their life that is gone. And I thought that was incredibly done. And it's almost like the Duffers just let them go and let them talk to each other in a very organic fashion, and really wasn't that much of script involved. I thought it was so damn good. Probably another one of the best moments of this is they built this monument to all the people who died in the Great Hawkins earthquake, and that just so happens to be right there where the town hall's at, where 11 made her last stand and died, allegedly. And Mike has not moved on. He's just sitting out there, and his mom calls Joyce and says, "Hey, Mike didn't come home last night. I'm really worried." And Hopper says, "I think I know where he's at." And Hopper meets him at the monument. and sits down and has this really cool heart-to-heart with him that was, honestly, it was really touching, and it was awesome the way it was structured, where Mike is blaming himself for what happened, and Hopper tells him, you got two roads you can go down. You can spend the rest of your life blaming yourself and be miserable, or you could do what Eleven would want you to do, and that's respect her decision and move on and have a happy life. And ultimately, it seems like Mike chooses the happy life. And then you got a scene that has been a long time coming, and that's where Hopper and Joyce finally have that dinner at that nice Italian restaurant in Hawkins. I believe it's called Enzo's. And that is where they have their happy ending, where now all the kids are gone off to college or leaving the nest, and Hopper's like, we can start over, we can leave Hawkins too, nothing's holding us here now. And he proposes to Joyce, and she says yes, and they have their happy ending, and it's pretty damn incredible. There's also a couple little Easter eggs in there, because I believe the name of the town he said he could get a job at as a police officer was Manitowoc, which I think Manitowoc was part of the MK Ultra project and stuff like that. So that was a cool little Easter egg there too. And then you come to probably the most emotional moment of the show, where the group is playing one last game of D&D, and ultimately they do something in the game where they summon a mage and they defeat the final boss that Mike has set up, because Mike's playing Dungeon Master, and the game ends, and Max is like, that's it, that's how it ends. And at first glance I didn't really catch it, but it was commentary from the Duffers saying that all this time we've had this great story told, and now how do you end it? And Mike is allegedly this really good dungeon master because he's a good storyteller, so Max is like super frustrated and throwing shit and stuff. It's like, it can't end like this, it can't end like that, just kind of giving this cool little meta commentary as her being the audience, like being us, being frustrated with how the season has gone so far. It's really weird how the Duffers kind of predicted that. And then it comes down to Mike's final words. He was like, yeah, everybody lives happily ever after, everybody gets their happy ending, and everything is great. And she's like, what do you mean? And then he goes around the room and he says, you and Lucas get together, stay together, and grow old together, and have many happy days. It gets to Dustin where he's like, he goes off and he studies and becomes a great scholar, but still finds time to make room for adventures with Steve. And then he gets to Will and says Will finally has his acceptance and finally embraces who he is, and it shows Will in a bar with his new boyfriend. And then it gets to him where he's talking about the mage, and that is essentially him talking about Elle, and he knows that he can't talk about it because he doesn't want the government to know that she might be alive. And he tells the story that her sister, aka Callie, made one last illusion while Elle snuck away, and everybody got what they wanted. Callie sacrificed herself, and 11 got to escape and live a normal life at the cost of losing everything. But it's never really said that that's what happened. That's why I keep saying Elle's allegedly dead, because the Duffers left it up for interpretation. Do you believe? And that's one of the key things in Mike's final words is, if you want to believe that. And everybody around the room was sobbing and saying, I believe. And I thought it was great. I thought it was awesome. And then one by one they all go and they put up their D&D manuals up on the shelf until Mike is the last one. And throughout that whole scene, all of them are bawling and having true emotional responses, where I think that they did the same thing they did with Steve and Nancy and Jonathan and Robin. They let the actors' emotions of this being it flow through them and gave these really good organic performances. And it ultimately ends with Mike being the last one putting his book on the shelf. And when he is walking up the steps, he is almost ran completely over by Holly and all of her friends and Derek as they go down and start playing D&D, essentially passing the torch on to a new generation. And I found that ending to be damn good. It was going to be really hard to end this show no matter what. And I do think they could have ended it better. But the route they chose at the end there, that was probably the most emotional way that they could have done it. That would have been the most effective. And I think the Duffers did a damn good job with that. As far as the things that I didn't like, once again, Linda Hamilton was just completely underutilized, especially in this finale. That's something that I figured wasn't going to step up in this final episode. So it's just a damn shame that she got wasted the way that she did. And although we did have a death in this finale, it followed the same formula of the other seasons where a side character meets their end, and that side character is Callie. And I know a lot of people hate that character, so it definitely didn't have that much of an impact. But I didn't care for how formulaic it felt. It felt like it was just doing the same thing that it did in the other seasons, and they had a chance to really have a super emotional impact. But at the same time, I think that they found a way to make this finale emotional regardless of a main character dying, which was something that I was very concerned about. I felt like a character had to die, but I felt like they did a pretty damn good job of having that emotional gut punch without anyone passing away. And unfortunately, like I said before, I felt like that this episode was the best written episode of the entire season, and that ultimately leads to everything in this episode feeling a little bit rushed because they had to play catch up and they had to do all these things in order to make this finale land. And it's a testament to the rest of the season that the entire season could have been better and would have led up to an even grander finale, and the finale wouldn't have had to have been rushed. Because I wanted some of the stuff that happened in this show, in this finale, some of these scenes and stuff, I wanted them to marinate a little bit longer. I wanted to be in those scenes longer. The final battle with Vecna, Hopper and Vecna facing off against each other, stuff like that. I wanted to see more of that, and ultimately it got rushed because they tried to do too much, or either they didn't do enough in the other episodes. But although it isn't perfect, and it may be the weakest season so far overall, I think the Duffer Brothers did a good job of delivering a satisfying, emotional finale to this saga that they have been taking us on, this crazy sci-fi horror journey that is honestly something that it's very sad to see it go, because I didn't realize this till last night, but me and my wife, we've been together for 10 years. We've only been married for 4, but we've been together for 10 years. And this was the first show that me and my wife bonded over. It's one of those things that we grew with the show, even though there was this big gap at the end there. It was something that we shared together. It was actually one of the first things that was horror related that my wife got into. And now she's a little bit of a horror fan, where she was a hands-off horror fan at first. She didn't want to have nothing to do with any kind of a horror movie, even light horror. This kind of pushed her into the genre and ultimately bonded me and her together more. So I had a pretty emotional response to this finale and the finality that this is over. And now I'm hoping that something great will come along, whether it be a spinoff of this show or a completely different show entirely, that's going to fill that upside down size void that's going to be left in my soul that craves for this show. Or maybe that void will never get filled. We'll never know. But I think that the road that they started out on in this season to the finale, I think that the Duffers gave us what we wanted. There's a rumor floating around that there's about 2.5 hours of footage cut out of this show. I don't know. I would like to see that if it is. Hopefully Netflix didn't do that, because that would be a damn bummer and a shame. But I think what they had going in the beginning to the very end, I think that they did a pretty good job. Do I wish that it could have been better? Of course I do. But in a world where TV shows usually don't end well, the Duffers definitely stuck the landing, in my opinion. So with all that being said, Stranger Things Season 5 gets a 4 out of 5. And it's Grizzly grade guaranteed. If you're a fan of Stranger Things, and you're a fan of 80s culture, 80s movies, anything 80s and its nostalgia done well, you need to watch this entire series. This may be the weakest season so far, but I think that it was a pretty damn good emotional ending. Well, that's going to do it for this video. Thank you all so much for your continued support and patience. Without y'all, this channel isn't possible. If you like this video, like it. If you like it enough, head over to the channel, hit the subscribe and bell button so you never miss a video. Also, please follow me on all social media platforms so you can get channel updates, movie news, and all forms of badassery. Thanks for kicking off the new year with me with my review of the finale of Stranger Things. Got a lot of movies coming out in January, so I plan on covering a good bit. So stay tuned for those reviews. In the meantime, head over here and check out my latest episode of Grizzly Grade Reviews, which is my top 10 best and worst films of 2025. And check the playlist here and watch some of my other reviews. But until next time, remember, I'm Joe Grizzly, bitch.